My name wasn't on the seating chart. Again. But tomorrow, it's the only name they'll remember. The email came in as I stood by the luggage carousel at Dulles, still in civilian clothes, still anonymous. Subject: Confirmation, Colonel Alexis Monroe, DoD Liaison, Project Sentinel, Final Briefing Authority. That one line carried more impact than 20 years of trying to earn their respect. I read it twice, then once more, just to be sure. The Monroe family dinner was scheduled for tonight. Brent, my older brother, would hold court again. Charming, polished, the heir apparent to our father's legacy at Westbridge Defense. Meanwhile, I'd be expected to sit quietly, fork in hand, nodding as they recited his accolades. 5 years ago, I left this house without a word after my father called my Army commission a phase and my deployment orders a waste of talent. I never argued, I just left. Tonight, I came back not to explain, but to observe. Let them have their illusion for one last night. The driveway hadn't changed, still cracked along the edges where Dad always promised to reseal it. My rented black SUV looked like it didn't belong, parked beside Mom's old Subaru and Brent's polished Mercedes coupe. The porch light was on. The welcome mat still had the same faded pinecone print from my high school years. I hesitated, then rang the bell out of habit. "It's open," Mom called from the kitchen. No footsteps to greet me, no embrace, just protocol. Inside, everything smelled of rosemary and roast beef. The wall of framed photographs still dominated the hallway. Brent's graduation, Brent's wedding, Brent's 2 sons holding American flags on the 4th of July. No commissioning photo of me, no military medals, not even a mention. "Alexis!" Mom called, not turning. "You're early. Brent and Emily are on their way." "Oh, and guess what? He just got another promotion. He's leading the Systems Integration Division now. You wouldn't believe how proud your father is." I smiled politely. "That's great, Mom. You'll have to congratulate him," she continued, not even glancing over her shoulder. "He's presenting to the Pentagon team next week. Big contract. Gerald says it could be Brent's defining moment." Defining moment. That's what they called it when Brent succeeded. When I made colonel at 30, they called it not bad for someone who just follows orders. I stepped into the dining room. The table was set for 6. There were no place cards, there never were, but the hierarchy was unspoken. Dad would sit at the head, Brent at his right, Mom beside them. I'd be somewhere, maybe near the end, or maybe they hoped I wouldn't come. The front door opened. Brent's voice preceded him. "Sorry we're late. Emily couldn't find her earrings." He appeared in the doorway, blazer sharp, cologne assertive. "Hey, Lex," he said, hugging me quickly before looking past me. "Wow, long time. What's it been, 4 years?" "5," I said. I wasn't joking. Dinner passed in a blur of forced small talk. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, and that same salad Mom had made since I was 10. Brent recited boardroom wins like war stories. His voice rose with every budget milestone, every cross-functional team he orchestrated. Dad looked like he might cry from pride. "And you?" Mom finally turned to me, her voice feather light. "Still bouncing around in the Army?" I took a sip of water. More or less. "Still a captain?" Dad asked, without raising his eyes from his plate. "Something like that." Brent chuckled. "Must be hard, always moving. No real stability, huh? Just following orders." I smiled, but didn't answer, because upstairs in my suitcase, neatly folded beneath my travel shirt, was my dress uniform. The Silver Eagle insignia gleamed from the shoulder. Colonel, Cyber Command, final authority on a defense contract Brent had no idea was under my direct oversight. They talked over me the rest of the meal, just like always. But this time, I didn't mind. Let them. I wasn't here for their validation. I was here to witness the final act before the curtain fell. After dinner, I retreated to my childhood bedroom. The twin bed still had the same patchwork quilt my grandmother had sewn when I was 12. The walls were a shrine to the girl I once was. Honor roll certificates, old soccer trophies, a faded letter of college acceptance, but no trace of who I became. Not the cybersecurity awards, not the leadership medals, not the letter from the Secretary of Defense congratulating me on my promotion. To them, I was the daughter who walked away from real opportunity, the one who wasted her potential. I opened my suitcase, pulled out the uniform, midnight blue, pressed with clinical precision, the ribbons aligned, buttons polished. I checked every thread, ran my fingers across the colonel insignia until the tension in my shoulders dropped. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Westbridge Technologies not as their daughter or sister, but as the Pentagon liaison with the power to greenlight, or end, their most lucrative military project. And for the first time, they'd have to listen, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. I slipped the uniform onto its hanger, letting it rest in the closet beside the dusty relics of who they thought I still was. And as I turned off the light, I whispered, not for them, but for me. They built the table, I brought the chair. If you've ever been overlooked after giving everything you had, type 1. Your story isn't over. The security guard called me Colonel before he even checked my badge. That had never happened in my father's house. I stepped out of the black SUV into the icy Virginia morning, the heels of my polished dress shoes clicking against the pavement with the kind of certainty that couldn't be faked. The military liaison, DoD authorized sign, was bolted to the parking space in clean white letters. I adjusted my collar, brushed invisible lint from the edge of my sleeve, and took a breath. Westbridge Technologies headquarters stood before me, sleek glass, steel lines, sterile elegance, a fortress for ideas, as Dad used to call it. Except now, I was the one holding the gate key. Inside, the lobby buzzed with energy, interns scrambling to look important, executives muttering into Bluetooth headsets, artificial greenery that whispered, "We care," in corporate dialect. But as I walked through the front doors in full uniform, the air shifted. Stares followed me. People straightened their postures. Even the receptionist hesitated before asking for ID. I'm here for the Project Sentinel Executive Review, I said, placing my DoD credentials on the scanner. My voice was steady, detached, practiced. The guard glanced at my rank insignia and stood taller. Colonel Monroe, he said. Welcome. The boardroom's been expecting your team, but no one mentioned you'd attend in person. They didn't need to. I walked to the elevator with deliberate calm. Each floor ticked by like years falling away. By the time the doors opened on level 12, Executive Operations, I wasn't Alexis Monroe, the daughter, or the outsider, or the disappointment. I was the final word. The hallway was quiet, corporate-scented. Brent stood by the window, scrolling through his sleek presentation tablet, no doubt prepping his highlight reel. His blazer was immaculate. His hair, regulation perfect. Everything about him screamed, confident, competent man in control. Until he looked up and saw me, his mouth opened slightly, his voice wavered. Lex, why are you in... Wait, what is that? I didn't stop walking. Good morning, Mr. Monroe, I said crisply. I'm here for the project review. Before he could reply, another voice echoed behind him. Lex? My father's. He stepped into the hallway mid-conversation with two other executives. He froze when he saw me. His face twisted, not into rage but confusion, a disruption in his blueprint. Why are you dressed like that? He asked. Before I could answer, Lorraine Hart rounded the corner. The CEO of Westbridge moved with precision and presence. White bob cut to a sharp angle, tablet clutched in one hand. Her steps slowed as she saw me, then her face lit up. Colonel Monroe, she said, extending a hand without hesitation. What a surprise. We didn't expect you in person. I thought it would be helpful, I said. Some things are better evaluated on site. Her handshake was firm, respectful, familiar. I agree completely. You elevate the room just by being here. She turned to the stunned group behind her. Everyone, for those unaware, this is Colonel Alexis Monroe, our Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel. She has final authority on all defense integration approvals. The silence was glorious. You could hear the weight of every assumption crashing down like broken glass. My father's jaw locked. Brent stared, eyes twitching. The two executives beside them looked from me to their tablets, trying to realign reality with the name on their briefing sheets. I didn't look back. The boardroom was minimalist and immaculate. A sleek glass table, a full carafe of filtered water, my name already printed on a placard next to Lorraine's. I sat down, smoothed my uniform, opened my notes. People filed in, engineers, directors, project leads. Some too young to remember a world before encrypted warfare, others old enough to carry Cold War habits. Every single one of them greeted me with careful politeness, the kind reserved for someone who could stop your funding with a sentence. Brent came in last. He sat near the end, beside our father, who hadn't spoken since the hallway. Lorraine opened the meeting. Colonel Monroe's insight has already helped refine key systems. We're privileged to have her oversight today. I stood. Let's begin with the integration report, I said. My tone was calm but exact. I've reviewed the current proposals. There are key areas that need adjustment before further authorization. My eyes scanned the room. People nodded, scribbled notes. Then came Brent's turn. He stood slowly, visibly unsettled. His hands fidgeted at his sides. As systems integration lead, I've prepared a rollout for Phase 2. Our approach aligns with performance metrics, mostly. I waited. He clicked to the next slide. We believe this streamlining will reduce cost, increase throughput. I raised a hand. Mr. Monroe, I said evenly, can you clarify how this strategy accounts for the 0.2 latency ceiling outlined in our March DoD directive? He blinked. I can double-check that section. You'll need to, I said. The threshold is non-negotiable. Please revise and submit by Thursday, Cobb. He nodded, jaw tight. Yes, ma'am. The room was silent. Then I moved on. That single moment, where he had to say ma'am in front of our father, the team, and himself, carried more weight than any speech I could have given. I didn't humiliate him. I held him to the same standard I held everyone. The meeting continued. I led 2 more segments, asked hard questions. Not once did I reference our history. I let the room speak in deference, in respect earned, not demanded. When the session ended, Lorraine turned to me again. Colonel Monroe will remain on site for additional reviews. Please offer full support. People began to file out, but the air had changed. The stares weren't speculative anymore. They were recognition, the kind you don't recover from once seen. Outside, I paused by the glass wall of the conference room. My father was still there, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on nothing. He looked like a man who'd built an empire and suddenly realized the map was wrong. He walked toward me slowly. Lex, I turned. We need to talk, he said, his voice stripped of certainty. I didn't nod. I just replied, then you better find a room where you can listen. If you've ever been overlooked until the moment they had no choice but to respect you, Type 2, you deserve to be seen. He called it a conversation. But the moment I walked into that office, it felt more like a courtroom, and I wasn't the one on trial. The blinds were drawn halfway. My father's office at Westbridge always felt more like a war room than a workspace. Mahogany shelves, outdated model jets, and an antique clock that ticked too loudly in quiet moments. Today, it sounded like a countdown. He stood near the window, back straight but tense. My mother sat across the room, posture tight, hands clutched around a handbag she hadn't opened since entering. Brent leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, avoiding my gaze. This was the Monroe version of a family summit. Cold air, careful words, and weapons drawn in tone. You've been a colonel for how long? My father finally asked, voice hoarse like he'd been rehearsing. 6 months, I said. 6 months, he repeated hollowly. And you didn't tell us. I did, I replied, eyes steady. I sent invitations to the ceremony. I emailed the announcement. I left voicemails. No one responded. He opened his mouth, but Mom jumped in. We didn't understand what it meant, she said quickly. Colonel sounds important, but we didn't know how important. You could have explained. I stopped trying to justify my worth, I said. Every time I called, the first question was about Brent's new project or the quarterly numbers. You only asked about me to suggest I quit the military and come home. My father stepped forward, shoulders puffing slightly. We thought you were stuck. All those relocations, never in one place, no stable plan. How were we supposed to see that as a career? Because you never looked, I answered. There was a pause. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, I added. I'm here because you asked to talk. So talk. Brent pushed off the wall, jaw clenched. Okay, then let's talk about today. I waited. You evaluated my rollout strategy in front of the entire executive team, he said, voice tight. You asked questions that made me look like I didn't do my homework. You didn't, I said. You embarrassed me. I held you to the same standard I hold everyone, I replied. The difference is, they prepare. Brent's eyes narrowed. You could have warned me, given me a chance. A chance to what? Dodge accountability? My father held up a hand. Enough. I turned to him. You wanted a meeting. Here we are. What do you want to know? He paused. Why now? Why not before? Why didn't you make this easier on us? I blinked, stunned. Easier for you? You could have eased into the room. You didn't have to walk in there in full uniform and catch us off guard. You mean I didn't shrink to fit your expectations? My voice dropped, steady and unflinching. That's what upset you. Not the uniform, not the rank, the reality. Mom stood slowly. Lex, we never meant to hurt you. We just didn't know how to support a path we didn't understand. You didn't try, I replied. My voice cracked then, just slightly. You knew how to show up for Brent. You knew how to ask about his reports, his board votes, his sons. You wanted to be included in his world. Mine just made you uncomfortable. Mom looked down. Brent rubbed the back of his neck. So what? You came back just to flex? Prove a point? No, I said. I came back because your company is working on a contract critical to national security. That's not a family grudge. That's my job. He exhaled sharply. Still feels like payback. I turned to him fully. If I wanted payback, I wouldn't have corrected your protocol. I would have let it fail on record. That silenced him. My father crossed his arms, trying to regain footing. So what do you want? Public acknowledgement? An apology? A press release? I want accountability, I said. For how you treated my choices. For what you dismissed. For the space you never made for me at your table. I pulled a small folder from my briefcase and placed it on his desk. What's this? The internal audit log from your systems group, I said. Your senior lead, one of Brent's guys, overwrote latency test results to match the deliverables. The original numbers failed DoD spec. I found Sasha Lynn's suppressed reports buried in a sandbox folder. My father's face paled. I flagged it, I added. Lorraine already knows. You're reporting Westbridge? Brent barked. I'm protecting the contract, and the country. I'm doing what you hired me for, just not in the way you expected. My mother stepped forward. Lex, we can't undo the past, but we can do better. I looked at her. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. Not pride, not denial. A willingness to admit failure. I'm not asking for a reset, I said quietly. But I am asking you to stop rewriting my story like I don't own it. My father's voice softened. You've built something we don't understand. That's not my fault, I said. It's yours. He looked down, then reached across the desk. Not a commanding gesture this time, but a quiet offering. He held out his hand. Colonel Monroe, he said, I underestimated you completely. I owe you an apology. I shook his hand, firm, no bitterness, just closure. Brent looked away, muttering, For what it's worth, your presentation was sharp. You didn't humiliate me. You were just better. I wasn't there to humiliate, I said. I was there to lead. He nodded once, and that, for Brent, was practically a standing ovation. If you've ever had to stand your ground alone until the truth finally backed you up, type 3. You were right to keep standing. The last time I wore this uniform in front of them, they didn't even look up. This time, they couldn't look away. 6 months had passed since that boardroom. 6 months since the name Colonel Alexis Monroe landed with the weight of everything they tried to ignore. I received a message that morning. Unexpected, short, no subject line. From Gerald Monroe. Body, dinner at your place this Friday? We'd like to come. Just us. Dad. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply immediately. I wasn't sure how to answer something I'd wanted for years, and had stopped needing months ago. But I sent back 2 words anyway. Sure. 7 p.m. The table in my DC apartment wasn't large, but it was mine. I'd polished the silverware. The bookshelf behind the dining area held more than just novels. It displayed framed citations, a few medals, and a small print feature from a military journal titled Cyber Command's Quiet Architect. At 6:59, there was a knock on the door. My father was first. He looked different, not smaller, but softened. In his hands was a black frame. I figured you might want a copy, he said, holding it out to me. It was the print edition of that same defense article, my photo centered, flanked by General Armstrong and Lorraine Hart. Beneath it, the caption, Project Sentinel, secured under the watch of Colonel Monroe. I've had this up in my office since the day it ran, he added, not quite meeting my eyes. Didn't want to tell you until I brought it. I took the frame carefully. Thanks, Dad. That means something. He nodded once and stepped inside. My mother followed, holding a warm pie tin with both hands. Apple, she said with an almost shy smile. Still your favorite, right? It is. She glanced around. It's so clean, so organized. I don't know how you keep it like this. I nearly answered with the obvious, military habit. But I stopped. She was trying. It didn't need commentary. Brent arrived last. Emily stayed home with the kids. He brought a bottle of red wine and an apology tucked in his posture. Nice place, he said, eyes scanning the room. Very you. After dinner, as coffee brewed and the scent of cinnamon lingered from the pie, Brent leaned against the counter. I implemented the rollout structure you suggested, he said. The team pushed back at first, but it works better than what we had. I raised an eyebrow. Did you tell them where you got it? He grinned sheepishly. Eventually, after I let them think I was a genius for 5 minutes, I chuckled. As long as it's working. He grew quiet, then added, You've really got it together, Lex. Honestly, I don't think I ever said that. No, I said. You didn't. Well, I'm saying it now. Across the room, my father examined the medals on my shelf. His eyes lingered on one, the cyber defense citation for preventing a classified breach last year that nearly compromised 2 federal networks. I read about that one, he said quietly. Didn't realize at the time that you were leading it. I was, I replied simply. He didn't say more, he just nodded. Later that night, we sat together again, this time in my space, my terms. The conversation drifted, light and comfortable. But just as the final cups of coffee were poured, my father raised his glass. To Colonel Alexis Monroe, he said, his voice steady, who proved that worth isn't found in following someone else's blueprint, but in building your own. We all raised our glasses. Mine trembled, just slightly. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a public apology, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in their eyes I'd never seen growing up. Recognition, not pity, not forced praise, but the quiet understanding that they could no longer ignore who I was because I had become someone they couldn't unsee. After they left, I stood by the window in silence. DC buzzed faintly outside, headlights streaking the streets like moving stars. My uniform hung on the back of the chair, pressed, still, dignified. That night I didn't hang it up. I left it there. A reminder, not for them, for me, because the victory wasn't in their changed minds. It was in the fact that even if they hadn't, I still would have risen. If you've ever had to become everything they said you couldn't, type 4. quiet strength leaves the loudest echoes.